The sun burned hot above the dusty town square. A broken wooden sign read public auction. But no one cared what was being sold, only that it was another show, another day to throw insults, to laugh, to forget their own sadness by mocking someone else's. In the middle of the square, chained to an old post, stood a man with blood on his face and dirt in his hair. His shirt was torn, his hands were shaking. His name was Noah, but no one called him that anymore. They called him Savage. The sheriff walked in front of the crowd, smirking. "This beast caused damage at the tavern," he said. "He broke a table, scared folks, and refused to leave town." The people jeered. Some threw stones near his feet. Noah didn't flinch. Noah's eyes were tired, not wild. His silence made them angrier. He didn't beg, didn't cry. He had already lost everything: his home, his family, his future. This was just another day of pain. The sheriff raised his hand. "Let's start the bid," he laughed. "He's strong. He can lift heavy things. Good for farm work or guarding chickens." Laughter rolled across the crowd. 10 coins. Shouted a drunk man with missing teeth. 15. Said a woman holding a broom, "I'll keep him chained in the barn." 20 coins and a bottle of rum. Someone yelled. More laughter followed. Noah closed his eyes, not because he was scared, but because he didn't want to see what dignity looked like when torn to pieces. Every voice sounded the same, cruel and careless. Then everything stopped. A soft voice, clear but trembling, called from the edge of the crowd, 50 coins. The crowd went silent. Everyone turned, and standing there was a young woman, maybe in her early 20s. Her clothes were simple but clean. Her hair was tied back. Her eyes didn't hold fear. They held fire. Her name was Clara. The sheriff narrowed his eyes. "You want to buy him?" "Yes," Clara said, stepping forward. "Don't hurt him." "I'll buy him," people whispered, stared. Someone laughed nervously. "Are you mad, girl? That's a savage." Clara didn't blink. "He's not a savage. He's a man, and I see a man worth saving." The sheriff chuckled. 50 coins, then he's yours. Just don't come crying when he burns your house down." Clara reached into her worn leather bag, pulled out every coin she had, and placed them one by one into the sheriff's hand. Her hand shook, but her voice didn't. She walked up to Noah, who still stood like a statue. She looked into his eyes and said softly, "You're free now." Noah didn't move, didn't speak. He couldn't understand why anyone would pay to save him. Not after all the names they called him. Not after all he had lost. Clara took out a small key from her pocket and gently unlocked the cuffs on his wrists. They fell to the ground with a dull clink, like a sound only the two of them could hear. People watched in confusion. The sheriff turned away. "Already bored. Let's go home," Clara said, her hand resting gently on Noah's arm for the first time in years. He took a step forward, not because someone pushed him, but because someone believed he could walk. They walked away slowly. The crowd muttered behind them, some angry, some confused, but none brave enough to stop her as the sun began to fall behind the hills. Clara and Noah disappeared down the dirt road, leaving behind the auction, the insults, and the name Savage. What no one knew was that this was not the end of the story. It was only the beginning. The road back to Clara's cottage was long and quiet. Noah walked a few steps behind her, barefoot and sore. His back ached. His wrists were red from the iron cuffs. Every time a breeze touched his skin, it felt like fire, but he kept walking, not because someone told him to, but because someone believed in him. Clara glanced over her shoulder often, making sure he was still there. She didn't speak much, but her silence felt gentle, not cold. When they reached a small gate made of old wood and rope, she opened it and stepped aside. "This is home," she said. Noah looked at the cottage. It wasn't big, but it looked warm. A little garden in the front had flowers, even though the soil was dry. There was a dog lying under the porch, tail wagging slowly. It didn't bark. Just looked up at Noah like it understood something no one else did. Inside, the cottage smelled like fresh bread and lavender. Clara pointed to a chair near the fire. "You can sit there," she said. "You're safe here." Noah sat slowly, unsure if it was a trick. His body was tense, waiting for someone to yell, to hit, to order him around. But no one did. Clara poured a bowl of soup and handed it to him with both hands, like it was something sacred. He looked down at the soup, hot and full of vegetables. His throat tightened. His fingers shook. He hadn't eaten real food in days. Maybe weeks. He took a small sip, then another. then another. Tears rolled down his face without warning. He tried to wipe them away quickly. Clara didn't laugh, didn't ask questions. She just sat across from him and said softly, "I don't know what they did to you, but you don't have to tell me unless you want to." Noah looked at her, then looked at the fire. "They said I was dangerous," he finally whispered. "But I only fought when I had to." She nodded. "I believe you." Those 3 words hit harder than any punch he ever took that night. Clara gave him a blanket and let him sleep in the small shed beside the cottage. It had clean straw, a soft mat, and a window that showed the stars. Before leaving, she said, "Good night, Noah." He stared at the door long after she left. No one had called him by his real name in years. The next morning, Clara found him sweeping the porch. His movements were slow but steady. She didn't ask him to do anything, but he wanted to help. She smiled, handed him a piece of bread and said, "Thank you, Noah." Day by day, things changed. He helped fix the fence, carried water from the well, and even fed the dog. Clara watched him with quiet pride. The villagers passed by and stared. Some shook their heads, some whispered, but Clara didn't care. She saw something in Noah that others refused to see. One evening, as they sat by the fire, she asked gently, "Why did they call you savage?" Noah didn't answer right away. Then he said, "In the war, I was trained to fight. But when I came back, everything was gone. My family, my house. I was angry, lost. I ended up in places I didn't belong. People judged what they saw, not what I carried inside." Clara's voice didn't shake. "Well, see a man who gets up early, works hard, and hasn't raised his voice once." He looked at her with tired eyes. "Why did you buy me?" She took a moment, then replied, "Because I couldn't let them break you one more time, not while I was watching." Noah didn't reply, but his eyes said everything that night, while the world outside whispered and doubted. Inside that little cottage, a broken man began to heal. He was still quiet, still hurt, still haunted by shadows, but he was no longer alone. Because Clara didn't call him a savage, she called him human. The days slowly grew quieter around the cottage, but inside Noah's mind, the noise of his past never stopped. Some nights he woke up breathing hard, sweat on his forehead, hands shaking as if someone had shouted orders at him again. Clara noticed his trembling hands each morning but never pushed him to explain. She simply placed warm tea on the table and said, "Sit, rest, you're safe here." One evening, after a long day repairing the old chicken coop, Noah sat beside the fireplace holding a small wooden carving he had made. It was the shape of a soldier kneeling. Clara watched from across the room. She could see his eyes drifting far away, lost in memories he tried to bury. "Do you want to talk about it?" she asked gently. Noah stared at the wooden figure. His voice cracked a little. "War changes people," he whispered. "Not the way stories say it does. Not with pride or medals." He took a slow breath. "Sometimes it takes more than it gives." Clara didn't move, didn't interrupt. She waited. Noah's eyes darkened as his mind slipped back into the past he avoided. "I was part of a rescue team," he said. "We were sent to bring home civilians caught between 2 fighting groups." His jaw tightened, but things didn't go as planned. He rubbed his hands together, the scars visible against the firelight. "My unit. My brothers. They didn't make it back." His voice shook. "We walked into a trap. We were surrounded. We fought for hours. My captain told me to run with the last injured soldier, so I carried him on my back." Clara's breath caught. She leaned forward slowly. "Did he survive?" Noah shook his head. "He died before we reached safety." A long silence followed. When I returned home, people didn't welcome me. They didn't understand why I survived and others didn't. They judged me, said I was violent, unpredictable, dangerous. Clara's eyes softened. "That wasn't your fault, Noah." But he didn't respond to her comfort. Instead, his voice grew quieter after losing my brothers. Losing my home felt like a second death. There was no place left for me. I wandered, took small jobs, slept in barns or abandoned buildings. I tried to stay away from people, but trouble always found me. He looked at Clara. "That tavern fight. Oh. It wasn't what they said." Clara waited. Listening fully, Noah continued. "A group of men were harassing a woman. They pushed her, called her names. I stepped in and told them to leave her alone. But they attacked me together. I fought them off. Broke a table in the process. The woman tried to explain, but the sheriff only saw me. A man with a soldier's strength and no place to go. So they called you Savage, Clara whispered. Yes, he said, lowering his head. And once they gave me that name, they treated me like something less than human. Clara took a deep breath, then reached out and placed her hand gently on his arm. I am sorry you went through that, Noah, she said softly. But here, I see a man who protected someone, not hurt them. Her touch startled him not because he feared her, but because it had been so long since someone touched him with kindness, not since before the war, before life stole everything familiar from him. Outside, the wind picked up, brushing against the windows. The dog barked softly from the porch, as if sensing the weight of the moment. Noah stared at the flames, letting Clara's words sit inside him, heavy but healing. After a long silence, he said, Why aren't you afraid of me? Everyone else is. Clara shook her head. Because I see your eyes, Noah, she answered. Someone dangerous doesn't look like they're carrying the weight of the world. They don't stay quiet. They don't build fences or repair chicken coops to help others. Noah swallowed hard. Her belief in him felt unreal, like a dream he didn't deserve. I don't know how to be normal anymore, he whispered. You don't need to be normal, Clara said. You just need to be honest, kind, and human. Everything you already are. Noah looked away, feeling something he had not felt in years. A small spark of hope, a tiny belief that maybe he hadn't lost everything after all. As the fire crackled softly, Clara added, Your story doesn't end with what happened to you. Her voice was steady. Your story starts again here. Noah didn't answer, but for the first time in a very long time, his chest felt lighter. He had shared a piece of his war. No one asked him about, and Clara had listened. Not with fear, but with understanding, and that changed everything. Noah had changed, but not everyone liked it. In fact, some hated it. Around town, whispers spread like wildfire. That crazy war dog is living with the nurse's daughter, said one man at the butcher shop. She feeds him, lets him walk free like he's normal, another muttered near the well. They didn't like what they couldn't control. And they couldn't control Clara or Noah every morning. Noah worked harder. He carried firewood, cleaned out the barn, repaired broken doors for the neighbors. Not for money, just to help, but instead of thanks, people stared, watched from windows. Locked their doors tighter when he passed by. One morning, Clara came home from the market with bruises on her arm. Noah saw it and froze. She smiled, trying to hide it. Some boys were just being rude, that's all, she said. But her eyes looked away too fast. Noah said nothing, but his jaw tightened. That evening, he walked into town, not to fight, but to be seen. He stood near the tavern where those same men laughed about hurting Clara. When they noticed him, they laughed louder. Look who's out of his cage. One sneered. Noah said nothing, just stared one by one. Their laughter faded. There was something in his silence more terrifying than any shout. They called him Savage, but savages lose control. Noah didn't even blink. Back at the cottage, Clara waited by the window, heart racing. When he returned, she opened the door and said, You didn't fight, did you? He shook his head slowly. I just let them see that I'm not afraid anymore. Clara stepped aside and let him in. Her hands were shaking too, but not from fear, from something else. Something closer to pride. The next day, the sheriff came knocking. Got a lot of complaints, he said, eyes sharp. Folks don't feel safe with him walking around. Clara stood in the doorway, firm as stone. He hasn't hurt anyone, she said. They're just scared of what they don't understand. The sheriff scoffed. If something happens, blood will be on your hands. Girl, I'll take that chance, she replied, without flinching. The sheriff left angry, but Clara didn't back down. That night, she and Noah sat by the fire. The silence between them stronger than words. Outside, someone threw a rock at the cottage window. It cracked the glass. Clara jumped. Noah stood immediately, went outside, but no one was there. He came back in, closed the shutters, sat down again. I won't run this time, he said softly. Clara looked at him. Neither will I. Days passed. Then a week, then two, and something changed again. The same people who feared him began to watch him more carefully. Some saw how he helped an old woman when her cart broke, how he lifted a crying child from a muddy puddle, how he never raised his voice, not even once. But not everyone wanted peace. One evening, 3 men waited outside the market as Clara walked out alone. They blocked her path, eyes full of hate. Think you're better than us? one said, taking in filth like him. Before Clara could answer, they grabbed her arm. She struggled, heart pounding. "Let me go," she cried. That's when they heard footsteps. Heavy and calm, Noah appeared at the edge of the alley, his eyes locked on them. He didn't yell, didn't run, just kept walking closer. The air changed. The men looked at each other, then at him, and for a moment the alley went silent. Noah stood between Clara and the three men, silent, unmoving. One of them stepped back, then another. "We were just talking," one said quickly. No harm meant. They ran off before he took another step. Clara stood behind him, breathing fast. "You didn't touch them," she whispered. "I didn't have to," Noah replied. When they got home, Clara cleaned her scraped wrist, and for the first time, she leaned her head on Noah's shoulder. He froze, not used to kindness in return, but slowly relaxed, letting himself feel something he had forgotten, trust, that night. As the wind blew outside and the cracked window whistled softly, Clara whispered, "You protected me." Noah said nothing, but in his heart, something shifted. She had given him shelter when the world gave him chains. Now he gave her safety when the world gave her fear. Kindness was no longer quiet. It had become strength. The storm rolled in without warning. Dark clouds swallowed the sky, and wind howled through the trees like angry spirits. Clara rushed to bring in the laundry, while Noah sealed the shed door. The dog barked nervously, sensing something more than just rain in the air. They had no idea that the storm wasn't the only thing coming that night. Thunder cracked loud above the hills. Clara lit candles inside the cottage while Noah stood by the window, his eyes scanning the road. He had learned to feel danger long before it arrived, and now his heart was heavy with unease. Just after midnight, the dog growled a deep, low warning from the porch. Noah stepped outside into the wind. His eyes narrowed when he saw three shadows moving toward the cottage, hands holding sticks, one carrying something metal. "Hey." Clara stepped behind him. "Who is it?" she asked, her voice tight. Noah didn't answer. Not yet. He watched the figures stop at the fence. One of them shouted over the storm, "You think we forgot what you did? You've scared our boys, made fools of us. Now we'll remind you who runs this town." It was the same group from the alley, the men who had tried to hurt Clara. Clara stepped forward, but Noah gently held out his arm to stop her. "Stay inside," he said firmly, but calmly. "I'm not leaving you alone," she replied, her voice trembling but steady. The men jumped the fence, mud splashing under their boots. "You don't scare us now, savage," one shouted. "You're just a man with a woman hiding behind you." Noah didn't move, his feet planted like trees, his eyes calm like still water. Clara clutched the edge of his shirt, whispering, "Don't fight, please." He nodded once, but the moment the first man raised his stick, Noah stepped forward fast, too fast for them to react. He grabbed the weapon midair and snapped it in two with his bare hands. The second man lunged at him with a metal pipe, but Noah ducked, turned, and swept his leg, sending the man crashing into the mud. The third froze, eyes wide. "He's crazy," he shouted, turning to run, dragging his injured friend with him. The others followed, slipping and scrambling back over the fence as lightning lit up the sky. Noah stood there, chest rising slowly, not from rage but from control. He hadn't struck them with hate, he hadn't shouted, he'd only stopped them with purpose. Clara stepped forward, placing a hand on his back. "You saved me," she whispered. Again he turned to her, his voice soft. "They would have hurt you." "I couldn't let that happen." She looked up at him, rain soaking her hair. "You didn't hurt them, Noah. You protected us without becoming what they called you." Noah looked at his hands, still shaking slightly, not from fear, but from the weight of choice. "I didn't want to become who they said I was," he whispered. "Not again." Clara smiled through the storm. "You didn't. You became exactly who you are, a protector." The next morning, the sun broke through the clouds. The road was muddy but quiet. No sheriff came knocking. No villagers showed up with torches. In fact, something else happened. An old man from the nearby farm stopped by with a loaf of bread. "Heard what happened," he said. "Those boys had it coming. Sorry for what folks have said about you, son. Later." A woman from the market left a pie on their doorstep with a small note that read, "Thank you for keeping her safe." Slowly, quietly, the town began to change, not because Noah fought, but because he chose not to, because he showed what strength really looked like. That night, Clara and Noah sat outside, watching the stars peek through the clouds. The dog curled at their feet. The air still smelled like rain. Clara turned to him. "You stood between me and death," she said. Noah looked at her, his voice barely a whisper. "You stood between me and the end of my story." She took his hand. "Maybe we both saved each other." And in that moment, with the storm behind them and the road ahead still unknown, they found something that no crowd, no sheriff, no cruel name could ever take away. They found peace, together. News of the stormy night spread faster than wildfire. Some called Noah a hero. Others still whispered behind closed doors. But one thing had changed. The silence was gone. The people were talking, and now they were listening too. Clara knew it wasn't enough. She had seen how quickly the wind could turn. If Noah ever raised his voice, even once, they would use it as proof. "See? He was always dangerous," they would say. Clara wouldn't let that happen. She decided to take her fight beyond the town. One morning, she packed a worn leather bag and said to Noah, "I'm going to the city." "To file a petition for your record?" Noah blinked, confused. "What record?" Clara looked at him gently. "The charges from the tavern, the labels, the lies, I want them removed." "You deserve more than whispered thanks and pies left on the porch." Noah looked down. "You don't have to do this. I want to," Clara said. "You fought for me. Now it's my turn." She traveled alone by wagon, the road long and rough. In her bag she carried photos, handwritten statements, and even the note that had been left with the pie. She visited the courthouse, explained everything to the clerk, then waited in a long line of people who also wanted justice. The clerk looked at her file and frowned. "You're asking a lot for a man charged with assault." Clara didn't flinch. "Those charges were false, and I have proof. He was the one defending others." The man sighed. "We'll need more than just words." Clara didn't give up. She went to the nearby veterans office, asking for help at first. They didn't recognize Noah's name, but then an older woman behind the desk paused, flipped through a dusty file, and said, "Wait, was he on Mission Iron Shield?" Clara nodded. "Yes, he told me about that." The woman's eyes widened. "He was the last one out. Carried a wounded soldier through enemy fire." "I remember this file." She printed the record and handed it to Clara. "Take this to the court. It's time they knew who he really is." Clara's heart raced as she returned to the city courthouse, file in hand. She laid it on the desk, and the clerk's expression changed the moment he read it. "This changes things," he said slowly. "We'll begin a review. You should hear back in 2 weeks." Clara thanked him and returned home, dusty and tired, when she reached the cottage. Noah was fixing a broken chair on the porch. He stood up when he saw her. "You came back," he said quietly. "I told you I would." She smiled. "And I brought something." She handed him the folded paper. His eyes scanned the words, then froze. "They found my file." Clara nodded. "The truth is on record now." Noah sat down slowly, staring at the document. "I thought that part of my life was gone," he said. "Like it didn't matter anymore." "It does," Clara said, "and now they can't ignore it." Over the next week, something surprising happened. People began stopping Noah in town, not with insults but with questions. "Is it true you saved a whole unit?" A boy asked shyly. "Were you really an Iron Shield?" An old man said, shaking his hand. "The sheriff came by one afternoon, but this time not with warnings." He removed his hat and said awkwardly, "I didn't know the whole story. Guess we were wrong about you." Noah said nothing, but Clara stepped forward. "He's been right here this whole time. All you had to do was look." That night, Clara sat beside Noah by the fire, reading the official letter that arrived in a brown envelope. "Your record is clean now," she smiled. "Even mentioned your bravery." Noah looked at the paper, then at her. "You did this for me?" "No," Clara whispered. "I did it with you, for the first time in years." Noah allowed himself to breathe without guilt. His name was no longer chained to lies. His past was no longer a weapon. Her fight had become his redemption. And the man once called savage was now recognized by a single word far more powerful: survivor. The day the letter arrived from the city court, something shifted in the air. Not just at the little cottage, but across the whole town. The official seal was stamped clearly on the envelope, and inside it read, "All charges dropped, status restored." Record cleared, but Clara knew that a clean piece of paper wasn't enough, not yet. She stood in the town square with the letter in one hand and her heart in the other. The same square where Noah had once stood in chains, where the townsfolk had laughed and thrown coins like he was nothing more than an object. This time, Clara didn't come to whisper. She came to speak. Everyone said he was dangerous, she called out. Her voice strong. They called him savage, treated him like he was less than human. But the truth was never hidden, it was ignored. People began to gather, slowly at first, then in numbers. Some looked away in shame. Others listened, faces tight with regret. This man carried his fellow soldiers through gunfire, Clara continued. Didn't brag, didn't demand thanks. He just wanted peace. And instead, you gave him fear. You tried to break him, but he stood tall. And when I was in danger, he didn't run. He shielded me without hurting anyone. Someone in the crowd mumbled. We didn't know. Clara stepped forward. We didn't want to know. That moment was caught on camera. A young visitor from a nearby city had recorded it on his phone. The clip was uploaded that evening with the title, "She saved a man the town tried to destroy within hours." It began to spread by morning. Thousands had watched it. By night, millions. News outlets picked up the story. Headlines read, "Innocent war veteran finally cleared after years of abuse." Reporters arrived at the town, knocking on the cottage door, wanting interviews, photos, proof. But Clara only gave them one answer: talk to him, not just about him. Noah stood before the cameras, nervous, unsure, but not silent. "I'm not here to blame anyone," he said. "I just want people to understand that you can judge someone by the worst day of their life. Everyone deserves a chance to heal." One reporter asked, "Do you forgive them?" Noah paused, then nodded slowly. "I forgive them because hate didn't save me," he said. "Kindness did." The story exploded across the country. Veterans sent letters. Families shared their own experiences of being misunderstood after war. Even government officials reached out, offering formal apologies. One even promising to award Noah with a medal that had been lost in military records for years. And then, something unexpected happened. A retired general named Marcus Blake stepped forward during a live interview, holding up an old, faded photo. "That man," he said, pointing to Noah's face in the photo, "was one of the bravest soldiers under my command. He carried 2 injured men through enemy fire while injured himself. And then vanished when he thought no one cared." The reporter asked, "Why are you speaking up now?" The general looked into the camera, because the world finally listened. Thanks to a woman who refused to be quiet back in the cottage, Clara watched the broadcast with Noah sitting beside her. She looked at him, eyes shining. "Do you believe it now?" she asked. "Do you finally see who you are?" Noah stared at the screen, his own face shining back. "Not with fear, but with honor. I don't know if I believe it yet," he said quietly. "But I believe in you, for a man who had once been sold, shamed, and left for dead." Noah now stood tall, not as a forgotten soldier, not as a broken man, but as a symbol of what could be healed. When someone dares to care outside, children waved as they passed by the cottage. One small boy shouted, "Hi, Mr. Noah." And Noah smiled, not the half smile he used when he was hiding pain, but a real smile, a full one, because now the world finally saw what Clara had seen all along. Not a savage, not a threat, but a man worth saving. And worth remembering. Weeks passed, but the warmth in the air felt different now. The town that once threw rocks and whispers had become quiet, respectful, even gentle. Some still struggled to accept what had changed, but most finally understood what they had ignored for too long. Noah was no longer the savage in their eyes. He was the man who fixed old roofs without charge. The man who saved Clara. The man who taught their sons how to swing a hammer. And their daughters how to stand firm when the world turns cruel. He had become part of their lives, but more importantly, he had started to rebuild his own. One cool morning, Noah opened the door to find a wooden box on the porch. Inside was a folded uniform, an official medal, and a letter signed by the president himself. Clara read it aloud, her voice catching with emotion. For bravery, endurance, and the quiet courage that inspires a nation, Noah held the medal in his hands. Not with pride, but with peace. "This doesn't change who I am," he said quietly. Clara smiled. "No. But it honors the man you always were." The two of them spent more time outside now. Noah built a bench beneath the old tree by the river, where he and Clara would sit every evening, watching the sun melt into gold behind the hills. Sometimes they talked, sometimes they said nothing at all. But the silence was never heavy anymore. Noah had started something new to a workshop behind the cottage. He called it the Rebuild Shed, where he fixed broken things, chairs, fences, clocks, but also offered quiet conversation to people who felt lost. People came not just for repairs, but for his company, for his patience, for the way he listened without judgment. He never asked for payment, but folks brought him what they could: fresh eggs, bread, homemade tools. One young man came every week just to talk. His brother had returned from war and wouldn't speak to anyone. But after hearing Noah's story, the young man said, "You gave me hope for him." One day Clara stood by the garden gate, watching Noah help an old widow repair her crumbling steps. The woman looked up at him with tears in her eyes and said, "I never said it before, but I'm sorry for what we did to you." Noah nodded. "Thank you," he replied simply, and kept working. Later that night, as they sat on the bench beneath the stars, Clara leaned into him and whispered, "Do you still feel like a stranger here?" Noah looked up, thinking for a long moment. "No," he said. "For the first time, I feel like I belong," she smiled, resting her head on his shoulder. Leave Noah the savage behind forever. He shook his head slowly. "No, I don't want a new name," he said. "I just want this one to mean something different now," and it did. The name Noah, once spoken with fear and mockery, was now said with kindness and respect. Children called him Mr. Noah, elders greeted him with nods, and young men asked for his advice, not because he had shouted to be heard, but because he had listened, healed, and chosen love over hate. Clara eventually opened a small clinic beside the workshop. Together they helped both bodies and hearts. The town began to change, because two people had shown that mercy was stronger than shame. One evening, as the sun dipped low and the crickets began to sing, Clara turned to him and asked, "If you could go back, would you change anything?" Noah looked at her, at the cottage, at the garden, at the shed, then at her face glowing in the sunset. "No," he said softly, "not if it means losing this. Not if it means I never meet you." She smiled, eyes shining. "Then it was all worth it." And in that quiet moment, a man once broken by the world and a woman who refused to look away sat side by side beneath the stars they both thought they'd never reach. A new life had begun, not with noise, but with love, with healing, and with the name of a man who was never lost, just waiting to be seen.